A fox knows many things, but a hedgehog knows one important thing.
Welcome to the Morning Hedgehog Podcast, where we explore the business ideas that shape your success. Here are your hosts Ira Gardner and Glennis Thomas. We now join Glennis and Ira in progress.
Another great piece to put on your website that will make sure that people get the key information they need is what's called trust elements. Primarily, those are testimonials or reviews. And according to Smart Insights, 85% of consumers read online reviews for local businesses before making a purchase. This one is amazing. 79% of them trust those online reviews as much as a personal recommendation. 67% of consumers need to read 6 reviews or less before they feel like they can trust a business enough to make a purchase. So, as much as we know that some people ask their friends to make a recommendation, that we know that they're not necessarily the most trustworthy thing, it's still an important marketing piece to have. Make sure that yours are true and that you didn't, do whatever you believe is right for your business, but understand you need to have them. I think culturally, it's also different for some people. If I talk to some people in the UK, there's a different feeling about those, but I still believe that whether you believe in them or not, they need to be there.
Totally agree.
So I would say add to your checklist, pump up your reviews, and look how much your competition has. Make a personal goal to beat that number. I mean, every once in a while, I'll get somebody who will call me up and say, "Well, you had more reviews than anybody else."
Nice.
So it means something to people. Another thing to consider putting up on your website is educational content. And that's where you can go in more in depth about certain key pieces of information that you want. And usually that's in the form of a blog post. According to Conductor.com, educational content makes consumers 131% more likely to buy. And just as interesting to me, their trust and affinity for your brand increases over time. So for example, if they read an article on your blog that talked about what you did, and so typically about 64% of those readers would feel like they would trust your brand as an expert. But a week later, after having read that article, that belief increases to 73%.
Nice. And one of the things I would also recommend for any blog post is to, if it's an educational blog post, put at the bottom of the post a author block or an author profile that just restates your credentials, who you are, because your blog post might get picked up by a news feed. It might and you want people to know, oh, well, this was written by, Glennis Thomas, who's a professional headshot and branding photographer and a former VP of internet marketing. Just having that at the end really reinforces your credibility in the marketplace.
That's a great point. And then a link, your URL back to your website.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I've started, and when we talk about websites, I'll show you some of the things I'm doing where I've just started building these reusable author blocks that I can bring into any blog post, and I have different ones for different types of content.
Oh, excellent. Okay. You're reminding me, I used to do that, and at some point I stopped doing that. So after we get off here, I'm going to go and add that back on.
I don't do it for everyone because I don't do it for every post, but I do it often enough if it's anything that's educational.
Yeah.
It was just kind of a what am I up to lately, and I know it's going out to my social media feed. I may not put it there, But if it's a substantive post about something educational, then I make sure I put in that author credit on there so that I don't know when, some people might want to quote that down the road. I just want to give my little mini resume, so to speak, to validate what it is I'm writing about.
Excellent. Excellent. I love that. So in terms of this slide, I just want to reiterate, make sure you've given enough information, make sure you've given the right information and not too much so that you're making it easy for people to want to do business with you, or at least take the next step. Okay, so here I want to talk about, is it easy to purchase, which is part of making it easy to do business with you. So you want to make sure you're offering multiple ways to pay. Smart Insights found that 59% of customers will abandon a transaction if their preferred payment method is not available. So review what you have right now and confirm that you have a good selection. And if not, look into some options. I don't see this too often, but sometimes I see people will require their website readers to register with them before they can buy. And according to Smart Insights, 29% of customers will abandon their purchase if they're required to do this. So you might want to revisit how important that is to you, and if there's a way to get around that so that you don't have a drop off.
Now, one thing we need to take into consideration: at what point are people buying? Are they purchasing a portrait session and prepaying? Is it after the photo session and they're placing an order? Is it through your secure client gallery that they might be buying products from? That's the challenge, is how many different buying processes do you offer your customers depending upon what products and services you're offering?
Right. And is it a different experience each time, which can be confusing to people, and maybe not confusing, but sometimes annoying. So however you can make it the same process, the same view that they go through, I think the nicer it is for our customers.
Yeah, so I think for every product or service, we need to map out what is the purchase process and take into consideration these questions you're bringing up about, are we making it easy to purchase? How are we expecting payment? And one of the things that I have been thinking about is the fact that demographics, what is your demographics of your target market? Because the expectation of how to pay is going to be different based upon the demographic of your audience. So, for example, I'll just tell you, I have not done Venmo yet. I know I need to, because if I expect to work with some younger demographics, increasingly I'm seeing people want Venmo because there's less fees than, say, doing a PayPal or a Stripe or some other service.
Yes, and it is important. We will drive ourselves crazy if we try to put every single option out there, but it is important to narrow it down to what's important to your audience. So since I work with individuals and I work with offices, it's going to be different. So a lot of times I send an online invoice through QuickBooks where they can use a major credit card and pay online there, or I have a swipe. I don't get very much in terms of Venmo or PayPal, so I haven't set anything up there. But then I get requests to set up an ACH program through a particular office to become a preferred vendor, or some people only pay by check. So being able to meet your audience where they are and make it as easy as possible for them is part of the marketing experience and part of how they're going to feel about you when they're done working with this particular project.
One thing I also put in here too is, do you accept payment plans? Like, I'm happy to take, for example, do a layaway plan on a wall portrait or a fine art piece. I'll break it into, I just put in there up to 3 payments, and let people know whether or not you have payment plans available.
Yes, absolutely. I've only done that once myself, but I know that in the portrait world and some of the other types of photography, that is an important, and that can be a differentiator for you as well if other photographers in your area aren't offering that. I also think it's really important to make people feel safe if they're doing an online purchase with you. It's been shown that more than 80% of consumers will feel safer making an online purchase if they see the credit card logos prominently displayed within the online store that they're going through. So that's another thing we can do to make it easy and comfortable for our customers.
Wow, that's an excellent tip. I mean, in the days of just having a studio, we used to have just the Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and American Express little stickers on the door that people knew walking in. Oh, well, they take all these payments. So we need to translate that into our online studio as well.
Yes, and that particular study didn't talk about having a secure platform for making that online purchase, but I just think and I'm sure there's probably a study out there somewhere, but it's definitely good practice that along with those logos to also put some sort of icon that shows safety, that it is a secure platform that they're making their online payment through.
Well, and I will tell you that when I selected my payment gateway platform and when I set up my website, one of the important decisions really was based on how secure is it. And in the case of one of my sites where I do a lot of online transactions, I pay an extra fee for an extra security firewall package just for that site, to be able to make sure my customers' data is as safe as I can possibly make it, which is why I also researched all the different payment systems out there and looked for which one's the highest level of security, because I actually market that to my customers that are I just let them know that we use the most safe and secure method possible.
Fantastic. That's great. Love it. Okay, so here I want to talk about, is your next step clear? And we've talked about this a bit already, but I want to really drive home the point that whatever your next step is, it is crystal clear. And we talked about in our last webinar about some business owners not wanting to come off as being pushy or salesy. And the thought is, oh, but it's obvious what the next step is. I mean, if they like the work that they see, then they would contact me and we would go from there. But I can tell you that marketing studies have shown for decades that if you are very clear about stating what you want the next step to be, your chances of that happening are significantly higher. I remember doing a direct mail test for one of my clients back when I worked in advertising, and we put out a letter and they were identical letters, but one of them had a clear call to action, something along the lines of call now to talk to a representative, versus the other one had all the contact information, but it just didn't give that direct ask. And there was a significant difference in terms of how many phone calls we got between those two letters. So never assume it's implied. And again, people are conditioned to be sold to. They're not thinking this as being salesy or pushy. Do it respectfully, but just be clear. So usually on your website, that means that you're going to have probably a call to action button or a call to action message. When I talked earlier about making sure all your contact information is up in the upper right hand corner of your website, that's a good place to always have a call to action there, whether it's book now, call us to set up a consultation, whatever it is, state those words. Contrasting colors so that call to action can clearly be seen and stand out on that page is important. If you aren't clear, you're confusing people, and confused customers buy nothing.
The confused mind always says no.
A confused mind says no, and a confused customer buys nothing. So lastly, in my slides here, is your next step simple? So Denise Lee Yon, author of What Great Brands Do, said, it's easy to end up with more complexity, but customers want convenience and simplicity now more than ever. And we know that, but it's so easy for us to overcomplicate things. What was that saying? Was it Longfellow who said, I'm sorry I couldn't write a more succinct letter. I didn't have time. So, when you're just doing stream of consciousness, you're just going to give all that information versus being able to go through and really make an effort to make things simple. And to drive this point home even more, Siegel and Gale's 7th annual Global Brand Simplicity Index study, it's a mouthful, found that brands that were the simplest to do business with grew by 433% from 2009 to 2016. The study also showed that 46% of U.S. customers will pay more for a simpler experience. And 61% of customers are more likely to recommend a brand because it's simpler to use. And then this one, the top publicly traded companies that are considered the simplest to use outperformed major stock indexes by 330%.
Wow.
Simplicity is important. Many of us are luxury brands. When people buy luxury, simplicity is very much a part of that. They expect incredible customer experience, and they want you to make it very simple, easy, comfortable, and enjoyable to work with you. So simplicity can go hand in hand with, this is enjoyable, it's easy. You're walking me through this. There's not a whole lot I have to think about. So I encourage everyone, go through your processes. How easy is it for your customers to view and select your proofs? Purchase the products, receive their final products. But even at the front end of things, how simple is it for them to get a hold of you? Do you pick up your phone? Do you answer your emails in a timely manner? And listen to what you're hearing from them, because most people aren't going to say anything. But the few that do, remember that's probably lots of other people have thought the same thing, even those tiny little comments. So think of that as an opportunity to improve what you're offering. I know for me that I have looked at my process, I have refined my process so many times. And to me, it's all super simple. But every once in a while, and I'll get people who are technically savvy, and they were prior clients, so they've been through this process with me before. But I think some people start to forget, and they forget how they did it before, even if it's laid out the same. And I've had people say, this wasn't as streamlined as last time, as streamlined as last time. And I'm going, it's the same exact process as last time. So, but I'm going to, I'm not going to say anything negative to the client about that. And so I'm going to absolutely make it as easy for them as possible. And maybe I need to take notes about, certain clients and how it works for them. So anyways, make sure that you are making it super simple. Always be improving and looking for ways to make things easier. And that's really it of what I wanted to talk today. Make it easy to be found, make each step really crystal clear, and be as easy to work with as possible. That should make an improvement in your sales.
Fantastic. I just have a quick question and actually a comment. You made me think about the fact that I personally struggle with going to a place like Subway because I can't deal with all the questions. I can't deal with, do you want this, 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 this? There's so many choices.
Uh-huh.
I just want a really good sandwich. Make me a sandwich. And so, so my buying style is to want to trust the person. If I struggle at a restaurant, I'll ask the waiter or waitress, say, you know what? Give me two choices that you really recommend, and then I just kind of narrow it down. So I like this idea of simplicity. And the other question the question I have is, what's the maximum number of steps we should have to any process?
I would say have as many as you need, but you don't need to divulge every single one to your customer. So even for on your website, some people will just try to simplify it in maybe 3 to 5 steps, the overall process, knowing you have a whole bunch of steps in between, right?
Mhm.
So some people like to give the whole process to everybody. Sometimes I think all you need to do is give them the process up to the next step. So on one of my web pages, that's what I do for my branding photography. I'll
Mhm.
say, let's have a free, no obligation consultation. Let's find out if you think I'm a good fit and if I think you're a good fit for me. If that's the case, then we're going to sign a contract. We're going to put down the details of what we're going to do, and then we're going to move forward. Now, there's a whole bunch of steps that happen after that, but really they don't need to know them yet to
Mhm.
get them to make that consultation appointment. And I don't want to start confusing them and bringing up more questions and sort of getting lost in that. So I just bring those steps pretty much up to the point of, do you have enough information to now want to pick up the phone or make an online appointment with me?
Got it. Nice.
Anything else?
Not that I can think of. This was fantastic. It just makes me think about how important it is to just periodically go back and re-examine your website, re-examine your business processes. And you talked earlier about how you worked with a consultant to worked on workflows even and simplified that. And so this idea of how can we just get it down to as few simple, clear steps as possible for our customers.
Right. And the processes that you have for yourself are hidden from your client. So in terms of from this idea of being easy to work with, you're just trying to figure out what are those few ones that I need to communicate that my customers need to know about. I
Hmm.
mean, sometimes explaining the process helps to um, uh, improve your value, right? So if a lot of people don't understand how many steps we go through and what's involved. So sometimes explaining that to people helps to increase your value, but it's not necessarily needs to happen for every single customer. It doesn't necessarily need to be this big, long, drawn out thing on your website. Just think about it in terms of what they need to know at each step, and just the pieces that relate to them. And also, I guess from what you were saying, when we review our process in terms of what our customers see, uh, we need to release our ego. At least I do. If somebody complains about one of my process and I'm just smacking my head going, I made it clear, I put it down on paper, we talked about this, or they don't understand and I'm like, oh, it's super clear, why don't you understand it? We have to release our ego and remember it's about their perception, and it's about what works for them.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I think this has been a great presentation. Really appreciate it. And we will look for you all next time on the Morning Hedgehog.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Morning Hedgehog podcast. For show notes or to submit a question or comment, please visit www.themorninghedgehog.com.